I've heard someone say this, the beings are in control the entire time. That means it's nefarious. My answer to that is, but that's exactly how humans treat animals. So if we needed to do medical treatment on a bear, we don't let the animal wander into the medical space on its own. When it's in our environment, we control it. We have to. For its safety, actually, also, right? For its safety, we have to control it. So that piece is really important. And the point I need to make here too is that sometimes when I hear a point like this, I think people assume that the aliens are on our level. And my point you'll see here is that the aliens are actually on this, a level of comprehension we lack. So therefore, we have to be controlled in their environment. No one has ever said this to me, that I was deceived. No one's talked like that directly to me, but I've heard people say this about great aliens and aliens in general. In an interview that Grant Cameron and Linda did together, Linda had mentioned that she was told in the 80s by military men, gray aliens lie. And it's like, don't trust them. Gray aliens lie. And I need to make it clear that, you know, I don't want to believe in things that are false. So I ironed out every aspect of my own story before I even published it to confirm, was I deceived somewhere here? And I can't see any deception. Though what the beings 100% did was not tell me things when I lacked comprehension about things. And they kind of were, you know, they scuttled around it. They tried to avoid the question, if you will. So, and I'll explain a bit, that I'm certain that this is what's going on with all of us, with every single contactee and government and everything, is lack of comprehension about what's going on here. So the aliens are bad. And of course, everyone's heard this one about gray aliens. The aliens are bad, dark, are deceivers, have no souls, are demons. Okay. So as someone with firsthand experience with the beings, it's hard not to comment when I hear people assume the beings have malevolent intentions. It should be noted that the research actually supports the beings are benevolent. Kathleen Martin has interviewed over 5,000 contactees and believes the beings to be benevolent. Mary Rodwell has interviewed over 3,000 contactees and believes the beings to be benevolent. Preston Denning has over 20 books on UFO and abduction research and believes the beings to be benevolent. Even Dr. David Jacobs' book, The Threat, doesn't actually have any contactees saying that they think the beings are a threat. He concludes that from his own personal opinion. All the contactees I have personally met and experienced the beings to be benevolent. Doesn't mean that they aren't confusing, weird, strange, and can push you. But in the end, all the people I interacted with said, you know, I think they were showing me something, and that there was more to it than just, you know, haunting or terrifying people. Undeniable evidence of the being's benevolent nature are contact events in which they share technology. Grant Cameron says he knows 50 people who have driven crafts. Jim Sparks, Susie Hansen, myself, all have driven crafts. That is undeniable. That makes no sense for a malevolent intention species to be sharing their technology. Senator Harry Reid, of all the information that I have, which is quite a bit, I think there is no indication whatsoever that they are harmful. He's talking about whatever's operating the UFOs. Kind of scary, to be honest with you, but there is no indication of there being a reason to be afraid of them. But I think they're big time scary. Senator Harry Reid, for those who don't know, he was part of the funding of the UAP program that Lou Elizondo was a part of, now going around talking. But when it first initiated, he was one of the people who was in charge of funding it. So I think this is an issue of humans thinking we are intelligent enough to understand what they are doing and why they are doing it. But it looks like we are dealing with aliens that use quantum technology. Therefore, I lean towards an idea that we lack understanding about their frame of reference of reality. We assume they think like us, but if they are immersed in quantum, then it's likely they think in dimensions. The analogy here is humans to Neanderthals. Imagine us going back to a Neanderthal. Now, you have 5 minutes with a Neanderthal. And basically, the Neanderthal is suffering. He thinks he's just food for the saber-toothed tiger. There's no point in living. This sucks. We're all just going to die anyway. And he has no hope. You come from the future and you say, no, man, you're going to make civilizations. You're going to make art. It's going to be this beautiful thing. Keep fighting. I'm trying to give you hope. You have 1 more minute left with the guy, and you say to him, okay, I'm going to go back home now. And he says, so you live in a cave also? You got 1 minute. How do you explain to him you don't live in a cave? Right? No, you live in a building with plaster walls that has heat, that has water, that has electricity. None of this stuff makes sense to him. So you might say, yeah, I live in a cave. Right? You might try to skirt around his question to you. So you might actually just try to avoid, giving him extra detail. Why? Because it would just confuse him. It would be useless to him to say, oh, plaster. Do you know what plaster is? Okay, well, it's like kind of sand mixed together. Okay, now you get it. Okay, now we have an infrastructure. Okay, now do you get the heat? Okay, heat, we have heat. Like, it makes no sense. He would be just kind of like stargazed, and you wouldn't know what to do with the information. So you don't say anything to him. And I think aliens do that with us. And I think they do that with humans a lot, actually. I think they try to give us information when we are the ones requiring information, and they're responding to us in that process. So then why do some people have bad experiences with the beings? Here's my take on people who have had bad experiences with the beings. I think the beings think we have a limited frame of reference of reality, and they like to break it. They like to play with people's minds. But they do seem to treat open minds differently than a mind that thinks it understands the nature of reality. So I'm going to give a bunch of examples of this stuff. George Knapp reported that military men with A-type personalities that came to Skinwalker Ranch had a paranormal entity follow them home. So it was in the Bob Bigelow days, when Bob Bigelow owned Skinwalker Ranch, and then these military contract men would come, and the kind of more like aggressive types would get a paranormal entity that would follow them home to their house. The Commander Fravor story, right? So the whole Tic Tac video that became famous, part of the 3 videos that the UAP task force released. But Commander Fravor's story has a specific element most people don't know what to do with. So after he's barreling, so he's in a jet, and there's 2 jets, and four pilots are watching this Tic Tac. They're barreling around, and Commander Fravor decides to zero in on the actual UFO, turn and kind of counter it, and the thing either disappears or flies really fast. There seems to be no one's really clear either which one. But what ends up happening is that the object immediately flies to the cat point. The cat point is a rendezvous point in which the pilots were meant to go to before they were interacting with the UFO. So the question was, how did this UFO know the cat point? Now, again, what I see here is a species of aliens playing with the minds of the human, trying to say, how do you think I've learned that? Right? And apparently, Commander Fravor on Joe Rogan said the only person who had that information was the radar guy on the Princeton. When he radioed over, this object is at the cat point. He's the only one who knew. So how the hell did this UFO get this information? And so you're always left with this kind of brain-breaking moment. In both of these come from the Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation, that TV show. And I really loved some stories that were in here. And this one's the Sean Cahill story. So basically the same time when the Nimitz, USS Nimitz, was dealing with these UFOs on radar, you had this separate cruiser. So it's the USS Princeton. And so he describes it like this. Nimitz has something going on in the airspace. They were getting calls to go out on the bridge. They're basically saying, go out and see if you can see anything. They're not explaining what to see, but the guy says, go out, they're getting radar contacts. We need to see what it looks like. So this guy is the top security officer. So he goes out on the bridge with one of his men, and he says he looks at a 45-degree angle, and there was a constellation of lights, basically stars that were not normally there. So a whole constellation. And he said, as they were staring at it, they all changed positions, some were moving inwards towards the center, some were moving outwards, but all rotating. And as it rotated, some of the lights individually blipped off, and then they were all gone. So again, you have brain breaking with you think this is the nature of reality, and we're tripping up what you think is the nature of reality. And here's another point I need to make too. Consciousness to consciousness, right? And also, the beings don't do this stuff with civilians. You never see this kind of stuff. You never see this extreme stuff with civilians. You always see it with military, these kind of more extreme ideas. You never hear about people talking like, oh, I see 12 objects in the sky and they kind of tripped up in the way they did this thing. They're very different in the way they interact with different people. So I am basically pointing out that they obviously treat minds, that open minds, differently than a mind that thinks it understands the nature of reality. So an example of this reception and response to us and how we interpret what's going on, Linda Moulton Howe reports that the only country that doesn't have cattle mutilations is India, where they worship cows. So this is, basically I'm showing that who we think we are affects how the beings interact with us. And the point I make is that the behavior I see in aliens matches the behavior I see of other Earth high-level beings, such as Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, and gurus. So people think they understand high-level beings because they're written in some book. But, these personalities are complex. Jesus flipped the tables at the synagogue. Jesus cursed the fig tree. People think that high-level beings are all, when they talk, they have angels behind them and stuff. Krishna called Arjuna neuter-gendered. He was offending him, telling him to get up and fight, right? He's breaking minds to break your brain, right? The Buddha used cones, right? My guru would do something that would shock people and or shock the person he's interactively dealing with, reading them and having the people kind of, oh, what? He would do something that would shock you. And this is Shiva here. This symbol is Shiva dancing on the baby, which is the symbol of ignorance. So this is Shiva, the god, dancing on top of the mind of the human, which is ignorance, dancing on the baby mind, dancing on the mind of ignorance, but dancing, get it? Playing with your brain, right? And that's the exact same behavior I see out of the aliens. High-level beings, loving almost, getting enjoyment out of your frame of reference of reality. I'm going to bust that up a little bit and change what you think is the nature of reality. So that's what I see out of most of the stuff. But the other part of it too is that the aliens themselves are dimensional in nature. And so they force on people to approach your fears. And if you aren't comfortable approaching or conquering your own personal fears, then the aliens will push, kind of a paranormal energy on you. And if you're not used to that energy, if you haven't experienced any type of idea of, an expanded sense of consciousness, then this will terrify you. In one person I saw talking about their experience, they said there was an entity in the corner and it was the darkest and evilest entity it had ever seen. And I was like, you think you might be projecting, right? Like you might be projecting. This thing might be touching a part of you that you haven't explored yet. That's why ghosts are scary, right? Ghosts scare people, not because it's a person who's invisible in your room, but because it's making you force yourself about a part of yourself that you haven't looked at, which is an expanded sense of consciousness. If you don't look at it, then you just project your own fear back onto it. And the aliens do the exact same thing to people. So why do some people have bad experiences? I think the beings understand that post-traumatic growth is good for a human as a method of breaking their frame of reference of reality, breaking out of their mind. You'll see today, I'll give examples of this. In my 3 contact events, the beings did exactly this with me. Post-traumatic growth refers to positive psychology change resulting from a struggle with traumatic or highly challenging life circumstances. Experiencing a traumatic event can have a transformational role in personality among certain individuals and facilitate growth. I think this is what's going on with the beings. They're always breaking minds, throwing you out of your own frame of reference of reality. Okay, so we're getting to the end of this section here, but I've also heard people say this too. So when someone prays to Jesus, and the beings leave, that proves they're demons. What I say to this is, I mentioned this in my last video, in which when will humans gain the consciousness abilities of gray aliens? I talk about what happens when we are worshiping an external, deity, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, gurus. What we're doing is when we get close to them, we embody the higher self. So when you're worshiping, you're praying, and you're feeling that God is close to you, you're actually bringing in your own higher self. And when you bring in your own higher self, that's what the beings are responding to. That is exactly what CE5 does. Stephen Greer has you, feeling unity, feeling connection. You're therefore bringing in your own higher self. The beings respond on this level of the higher self. This is what happened in my own contact events. This is why CE5 works. This is why when you're saying, I don't want this anymore, and you pray, you're using your higher self to do it, then the beings actually literally respond to that. So here's Jacques Vallée. The UFO phenomenon represents evidence for other dimensions that simply cannot be understood apart from their psychic and symbolic reality. What we see here is not an alien invasion. It is a spiritual system that acts on humans and uses humans. So ultimately, the thing that I say from after all my research and experience, especially with my book and everything I've seen, listen, I sold myself coming out in public as a guy who was not in this field. I was not in this field. And then it kind of like delved into it from the outside going in. And I figured out that nobody understands what this is. Don't believe that some government guy understands it, because I'm not convinced of that anymore. I don't think anybody understands what it is. And what I mean by that is we may have the modalities now. In the 50s, 100 years ago, humans did not have the modalities to understand it. And I think the beings are partially responsible for bringing those modalities to us to understand it. So on paper, we now understand quantum reality. On paper, we can understand these high-level consciousness experiences, but no one's living it. No, and when it's the same thing with the Neanderthal. You can finally tell the Neanderthal what's going on with the house. You can explain to him the house, but he's not cooking on the stove. He doesn't use the fridge. He still isn't living it. So he therefore is still lacking comprehension. He doesn't have to pay rent. He doesn't even gone to that level about what it means to even own a house. And so you have this whole other reality when you actually start living things. And this is what's going on. I'm totally certain of it, that we're dealing with lack of comprehension about other dimensionality, and no one on the planet is living it. Though we are understanding, we're finally getting the modalities to understand this stuff. So I wanted to use the movie Contact. I don't know if people remember Contact with Jodie Foster. Yeah. So the movie Contact, I think, is the best explanation for all alien contact going on here with us. When people remember this movie, it was a beautiful movie where an alien was basically giving messages to humans. And the result is when Jodie Foster finally goes visit the alien in their dimension, it turns into her dad. And she at first thinks it's her dad. This is, sorry, there's lack of volume here.
I missed you.
So the alien allows Jodie Foster character to believe it's the dad, and then gives Jodie Foster's character a moment to figure out with her own comprehension what's really going on here. It's not her dad. It's an alien, right?
None of this is real.
That's my scientist.
So this analogy, I think, is the best analogy for all stuff going on with the aliens, that we're dealing with interdimensionality and incomprehensibility. And the beings are dimensional by nature, which is confusing to humans, and how they express themselves ends up being confusing to humans. So you can watch that little clip. I thought that was a really good example of this part here. So just the point that I want to make, but some questions about, for me, how large this goes and why this is so much more bigger than humans are willing to understand. Just some questions that I don't even think people have ever asked, right? Do you think this is the first time gray aliens have hid in the background of a society? Right? This is massive. Right? Because they're very skilled at what they're doing. If they're sitting in the background, they've been here the entire time, and they're slowly evolving, and they're slowly abducting, and they're slowly impacting people, then this is unprecedented, and they're obviously very skilled at it. So, where did they get these skills? You could almost ask. So there's just, I keep pointing out that this is massive. It is huge to the brain of the individual human. And I'm convinced no person really has the full picture, and that the beings themselves are slowly giving us the pieces so we can comprehend it, right? Here's another one. If aliens have been involved in the genetic manipulation of the human species and introduced other alien DNA throughout human biological history, then whose planet are we on? Are we ready to even have these questions? Are we ready to have the answers to these questions? Right? So I'm going to make a kind of a crazy statement if none of this is already sounding crazy, but I personally don't believe in disclosure. I believe if people want the information, they should get it. But I don't think the average human being, I don't think this helps the average human being. I don't. There's always something that disturbs people. It doesn't matter what it is. There's always a level that will disturb them. And I don't think that that's really that helpful if they're not looking to have that part of their brains opened up. And I think this is the challenge that maybe, people in positions of power are aware of, that this is just too big. It's too massive. It's too large for the human brain. And so again, I do believe in disclosure. If you yourself say, no, I can take it. I want to know the truth. I need to learn it. I need to. And you kind of go down that road and you should get all that information. I do believe that. But I also believe that it's not helping people. It won't help them. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. Okay. This is my last little bit about what I get to say about gray aliens, because this is the last presentation I'll do like this. Who I think they are. Life-preserving stewards of the planet. I think they've been here forever, and I think that they're life preservers. The beings I know are nature lovers, and that's why they're into genetics, because they're good at all this stuff. They love nature. So that's my take on them. Life-preserving stewards of the planet. And our planet, by the way, preservers of our planet. I'm convinced that they have some kind of role. They take on the scientific role, like our own scientists would do. Our own scientists would study colonies and study things. I'm certain that's the feeling that goes off here, that they're stewards. The elder told me she was humanity's agent of change once when I asked her. And I take that as like a evolution scientist or consciousness scientist. That's what I think these beings are, evolution consciousness scientists. With technology for your eternal consciousness, not the brain. Though there is technology for your brain, they also have technology for your consciousness, which is what I think the download was. The Mystic Book is this thing that they were able to lodge in me in this kind of deep consciousness way. Really insane stuff, man. And this is just, humans don't even have a way of kind of referencing this stuff. It's so out of our comprehension. What my story says to me, most importantly, because the beings knew I would meet the guru, is a Vedic lens is a way to understand these beings. White Room to the rising to the guru is the story. And then the Mystic Book, I guess you could say. And so that means to me, when I talk about this, I have to tell you that you are God, because that is the core of what I was doing when I had the White Room experience and then had the rising. I was trying to find my godhood inside me. Brahma exists, God is real, and you are God. The universe is not permeated with an energy, but also awareness. So I'm not saying the universe is not just permeated with an energy, but also awareness. The people want to think that, yeah, okay, I believe in this universe is kind of, we're all one. I'm upping the ante, that unity is awareness. And that's what you are. You're an offshoot of that unified awareness. It's not just a mechanical energy. The world around you is alive. Can you imagine that the buildings and the trees and the earth is all consciousness, all offshoots of the one consciousness? And you are that, and you are all of it. So this is a meditation that I do. And this is from my teacher, Aham Brahmashmi. So when you're off somewhere, you're at a lake, you're hanging out with friends, and you want to go be by yourself and do a meditation, you're doing something out in nature, whatever it is. Brahmashmi. I am the creator. Consciousness is inside. The consciousness in you is the God consciousness. So last, what I think needs to occur to move forward. This is my opinion, uninformed, but humans are stuck. I think humans are stuck in a space. And so the only ways that I think humans can move forward with this kind of new reality that's coming upon us is that humans need to be open to flexible government systems that change over time. We have these ideas that you have to have capitalism, communism, one's good, one's bad. As a person who loves Roman history, Julius Caesar fixed issues right away by becoming a dictator. And there are times where
government systems may need to actually jostle and change. And humans don't think that way. We think our government system is the system and that's it. And our present era might show us that capitalism, we actually have the economic science now. We know capitalism actually doesn't work. It doesn't fulfill everything. It doesn't give everything to all people, which is what capitalism was meant to do. It's also distorting, world economies, and it's distorting, realities behind AI replacing jobs. So there's a whole thing here about we may need to think differently, and maybe we do it for periods of time. But humans don't trust each other, so we can't do that kind of stuff. But that's the core of what I think needs to happen is humans changing the way we think about economies and governments, and altering and maybe being flexible for periods of time as we adjust to a new reality, to embrace maybe humans are damaging the planet and we need to think about how to get out of that. The other thing I think needs to happen, these are the two things I think that need to happen. The top 70, I pulled this number out because I just thought it was a good number, top 70 spiritual leaders on the planet. The human species spiritual elders, Buddhists, Christians, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Native, New Age, all of it, everything, top of the planet, all be given the exact information about what's going on with aliens. And those leaders should be the ones to share it to the public. That aliens are here, that humans have alien genetics, that humans are a part of a high consciousness, dimensional, spiritual galactic group, and that this is dimensional by nature. That's who I think should break this information, not some general, not some Pentagon guy, not some politician. This is a spiritual psycho crisis for humans. Aliens being here is a spiritual psycho crisis for humans. And this is the best way we can handle something like that, is by is a unity by all of our elders, the people that we come to as our spiritual wisdom, and getting them all together. Do you think that could happen? I don't know, but that's the vision, getting them all together and having them tell humanity as a whole, as a planet, that this is the new reality. Otherwise, I think the whole thing is going to fumble and be screwed up. And I think that humans it will just be messy. I really think that will be messy unless we have the right leaders giving out that right information.